My heart was pounding so hard I was sure Thomas could hear it from across the room. I lay perfectly still on our bed, forcing my breathing to stay slow and deep, keeping my eyes barely cracked open, just enough to see through my lashes. The bitter taste of the tea still lingered on my tongue, even though I had secretly poured most of it into the plant by our window when Thomas stepped out to answer his phone. For weeks now, I had been waking up groggy and confused, with gaps in my memory that made no sense. At first, I blamed stress from work or maybe I was getting sick, but then I started noticing things. The way Thomas would insist on making my evening tea himself, how he would watch me drink it with this strange, intense look in his eyes. The way I would fall into such a deep sleep that I wouldn't even hear our neighbor's dog barking all night, when normally the smallest sound would wake me up. Tonight, I had finally worked up the courage to test my growing suspicions. When Thomas left the room to take what he said was an important work call, I quickly dumped the tea into the soil of our bedroom plant and refilled the cup with water from our bathroom sink. Then I climbed into bed and waited. Now, lying here pretending to be unconscious, I watched through my barely open eyes as Thomas quietly entered our bedroom. He moved like a cat, careful and silent, checking to make sure I was really asleep. He whispered my name softly, "Natalie? Honey?" When I didn't respond, he came closer and gently shook my shoulder. I forced myself to stay completely limp, fighting every instinct to react. What happened next made my blood turn to ice. Thomas walked over to our dresser and pulled out his phone. But instead of making a call, he opened the camera app and started taking pictures of me lying there, apparently unconscious and vulnerable. The soft clicking sounds of the camera shutter filled the quiet room. He moved around the bed, taking photos from different angles, his movements practiced and deliberate, like he had done this many times before. My mind was racing, but I forced my body to stay perfectly still. This was my husband of 6 years, the man who brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. The man who held me when I cried after my father died last year. The man who promised to love and protect me when we stood at the altar and said our vows. But the Thomas I was watching now was someone I didn't recognize at all. He disappeared into our walk-in closet and came back carrying something that made my stomach drop. Professional camera equipment. A real camera with a big lens and what looked like a tripod. He set it up quickly and quietly, like he had done this routine before. The camera was pointed directly at me. I thought about our life together, trying to understand how I had missed the signs. We met at a coffee shop near my office 5 years ago. He was charming and funny, always making me laugh. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, traveling sometimes for work, but he always seemed excited to come home to me. We got married after dating for 2 years, and I thought we were happy. But looking back now, I realized things had started changing about 6 months ago when he got a new position at his company. He became more secretive about his work, taking phone calls in private and spending more time on his computer with the screen turned away from me. He started insisting on making my tea every evening, saying he wanted to take care of me after my long days at work. I had thought it was sweet. How wrong I was! The camera clicked again, and I realized Thomas was now taking video, not just photos. He was recording me lying there, helpless and unconscious, or so he thought. The red recording light on the camera felt like it was burning into my skin. My mind was spinning with questions. How long had this been going on? What was he doing with these photos and videos? Was he sharing them with someone? Selling them? The thought made me feel sick. Thomas moved closer to the bed again, and I could feel him standing right next to me. Through my barely open eyes, I could see him looking down at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't love or concern, it was something cold and calculating that made my skin crawl. He reached out and touched my face gently, almost tenderly, but now the touch felt like poison. Perfect, he whispered so quietly I almost didn't hear him. That single word told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the first time, this was a routine for him. My own husband had been drugging me and taking advantage of me while I was unconscious, and I had no idea how long it had been going on or what else he might have done. As Thomas continued setting up more equipment, I realized I was trapped in a nightmare that was far worse than I had ever imagined. The next morning felt like I was living in someone else's life. I sat at our kitchen table, staring at my coffee cup while Thomas got ready for work, acting like nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead before leaving, the same gentle kiss he gave me every morning, but now it felt like a lie against my skin. "Have a good day, sweetheart," he said with that warm smile I used to love. "I'll be home around 6. Maybe we can watch a movie tonight." I nodded and smiled back, but inside I was screaming. How could he stand there acting so normal after what I had witnessed? How long had he been living this double life? The moment his car pulled out of our driveway, I was on my feet. I had maybe 8 hours before he came home, and I needed answers. I started in our bedroom, looking at everything with new eyes. The plant where I had dumped my tea looked slightly wilted, which confirmed my suspicions about what had been in that cup. I searched through Thomas's side of our walk-in closet, moving carefully so I wouldn't disturb anything. Hidden behind his winter coats, I found a small black bag I had never seen before. Inside were tiny cameras, no bigger than buttons, and what looked like recording devices. My hands were shaking as I realized these could be anywhere in our house. I spent the next 2 hours searching every room, and what I found made me feel sick. There were hidden cameras in our living room, kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom. Tiny devices tucked behind picture frames, inside decorative objects, even one hidden in the air vent above our bed. Our entire home had been turned into some kind of recording studio, and I had been completely unaware. But the worst discovery was in Thomas's home office, a room I rarely entered because he said he needed privacy for work calls. I had always respected that boundary, but now I understood why he wanted me to stay out. His desk had a locked drawer that I had never questioned before. Using a hairpin, I managed to get it open, and what I found inside made my legs give out. Hundreds of photos, all of me, all taken while I was unconscious. There were photos from different nights, different clothes, different positions. Some were from months ago, based on a haircut I remembered getting in the spring. The timestamps on the photos showed this had been going on for at least 6 months, maybe longer. There were also USB drives labeled with dates, which I assumed contained videos. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and called my sister Carmen. She was working her shift at the hospital, but I needed to talk to someone I trusted. "Nat? What's wrong? You sound terrible," Carmen said as soon as she answered. "I need to see you. Can you come over after work? It's about Thomas." "Did you guys have a fight? You sound really upset." "It's worse than that, much worse. Please, Carmen, I can't talk about this over the phone." Carmen had always been protective of me, even though she was 3 years younger. She had never completely trusted Thomas, though she had never said why. Maybe she had seen something I missed. "I'll be there at 7. "Are you safe right now?" The question hit me like a punch. Was I safe? I was alone in a house filled with hidden cameras, married to a man who had been drugging and photographing me for months. I think so. He's at work. After hanging up, I continued searching and found Thomas's laptop hidden in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet. It was password protected, but I tried a few combinations based on dates that were important to us. Nothing worked. But I did find a notebook with what looked like usernames and passwords written in Thomas's handwriting. One entry caught my attention: night captures, $2,847 this month. Below it was a website address and login information. My stomach dropped as I realized what this might mean. Was Thomas selling these photos and videos of me? Was I being displayed on some horrible website for strangers to see? I also found receipts for camera equipment, sleeping medications that I didn't recognize, and payments to something called Discrete Digital Services. There were also notes in Thomas's handwriting about subject response times and optimal dosage amounts that made me feel like I was some kind of lab experiment. Looking through his phone records, which he kept printed out in a file, I noticed frequent calls to the same number over the past few months. The calls always happened during his lunch breaks or late at night when I was asleep. As I put everything back exactly where I found it, I realized that the man I married didn't exist. Thomas had been playing a role, being the perfect husband while secretly turning me into a victim. Every kind gesture, every loving word, every moment of intimacy we had shared was now tainted by this discovery. I thought about our wedding day, how happy I had been, how safe I felt in his arms. I remembered telling my friends that I had found my soulmate, someone who would never hurt me. How could I have been so wrong about someone I lived with every single day? Carmen arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, carrying takeout bags and wearing the concerned expression she'd had since we were kids whenever I was in trouble. I had spent the afternoon pacing around the house, jumping at every small sound, terrified that Thomas might come home early and catch me going through his things. "Okay, spill." Carmen said, setting the food on our kitchen table. "You look like you haven't slept in days, and you're making me nervous." I told her everything. About the tea, the cameras, the photos, the website payments. Carmen's face went from concerned to horrified to angry as I explained what I had discovered. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring at her untouched food. "Nat, this is so much worse than I thought," she finally said. "I need to tell you something. Last month at Mom's birthday dinner, Thomas cornered me in the kitchen and started asking really weird questions about the hospital where I work." "What kind of questions?" "He wanted to know about sedatives we use, how long they stay in someone's system, what kinds don't show up on regular blood tests. He said he was asking for work, something about a presentation he was doing for doctors, but it felt wrong, like he was fishing for specific information." My blood ran cold. Thomas had been planning this carefully, researching how to drug me more effectively. "Did you tell him anything?" "I gave him some basic information, nothing detailed." "But Nat, I've been thinking about it ever since. And it's been bothering me, especially because you've seemed so tired and out of it lately when we talk on the phone. I felt sick thinking about how Thomas had used my own sister to get information to hurt me. There's more," I said, and told her about the phone calls to the unknown number and the payments to the mysterious digital service. Carmen pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my friend Jessica. She works in the police department's cybercrimes unit. This sounds like something way bigger than just Thomas being a creep." While Carmen made the call, I walked to our front window and peeked through the curtains. Thomas's car wasn't in the driveway, but I felt like I was being watched. The neighborhood looked normal, kids playing in yards, people walking dogs, but everything felt different now that I knew about the cameras. "Jessica wants to meet with you tomorrow," Carmen said after hanging up. "She says what you're describing sounds like organized crime, not just one person acting alone. The website payments especially concern her." "Organized crime? What do you mean?" "She thinks Thomas might be part of a network that creates and sells this kind of content. The fact that he has professional equipment and seems to know exactly what he's doing suggests he's done this before, maybe with other women." The thought that there might be other victims made me feel even sicker. How many women had Thomas hurt? How many were still being hurt right now? My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Running late at work. Don't wait up for me. Love you." "He's not coming home until late," I told Carmen. "He does this sometimes now, stays out until I'm already asleep." "Probably so. He doesn't have to drug your tea tonight. He's giving you a break so you don't get suspicious about being tired all the time." Carmen helped me search the house more thoroughly, and we found even more cameras than I had discovered earlier. There was one in our guest bathroom, one in the laundry room, even one pointed at our front door. Thomas had been recording everything, not just me sleeping, but my daily life, my private moments, my conversations with friends and family. "We need to be careful about what we say in here," Carmen whispered. "If these cameras record audio too, he might be listening to everything." We went outside to my car to continue talking privately. Carmen had more disturbing news. "I did some research on that website you found in his notes. Night Captures is a subscription site where people pay to watch videos of women who appear to be unconscious or sleeping. It's technically legal because they claim the women consented, but Jessica says most of the content is actually illegal. So Thomas has been making money by selling videos of me being drugged? It looks that way. And if he's making almost $3,000 a month, he's probably uploading a lot of content. Which means this has been going on for a long time. I thought about all the mornings I had woken up, feeling confused and disoriented, all the times Thomas had been extra affectionate after I'd had a particularly deep sleep. He had been celebrating his successful crimes against me. "There's something else," Carmen said quietly. "Jessica ran Thomas's name through some databases. He's been married before, twice actually. Both marriages ended in divorce, and both ex-wives filed restraining orders against him." "What?" "He told me I was his first wife. He said he'd never found anyone he wanted to marry before me." "He's been lying about everything, Nat. We need to assume that nothing he's ever told you is true." As we sat in my car in the darkness, I realized that my entire marriage had been built on lies, and I was living with a dangerous stranger who had been systematically violating me for months. The next morning, I sat in Dr. Patricia Winter's office, trying to explain the situation to someone who had known me since I was a teenager. "Doctor, Winters had been our family doctor for years, and she was one of the few people I trusted completely. Her face grew more serious with every detail I shared. "Natalie, I'm so sorry this is happening to you," she said, reaching across her desk to squeeze my hand. "We need to get you tested immediately to see what substances are in your system." She drew blood and took hair samples, explaining that hair tests could show drug use going back several months. "The results will take a few days, but I suspect we'll find evidence of benzodiazepines or other sedatives. These drugs can cause the exact symptoms you've been experiencing: memory gaps, excessive drowsiness, confusion. Dr. Winters, there's something else. Has Thomas ever contacted you about me?" Her expression changed, and I could see she was debating whether to tell me something. "Actually, yes. About 2 months ago, he called asking for copies of your medical records. He said you'd been having health issues, and he wanted to make sure he understood your medications and any conditions that might be affecting you." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I couldn't release your records without your written consent, which he never provided. But Natalie, he was very persistent. He called 3 times, and the last time he seemed angry when I refused. He said something about being your husband and having a right to know about your health." This revelation made me realize how calculated Thomas's plan had been. He had been trying to access my medical information, probably to better understand how drugs might affect me, or to see if I had any conditions that would make his crimes more dangerous. "Doctor." Winters gave me a secure phone number where I could reach her any time and promised to rush the test results. "In the meantime, don't eat or drink anything Thomas prepares. And Natalie, please be very careful. If he realizes you know what he's been doing, you could be in serious danger." That afternoon, I met with Carmen's friend Jessica from the Cyber Crimes Unit. We met at a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere Thomas might see us. Jessica was a small woman with sharp eyes who looked like she had seen too much of the dark side of the internet. "I've been researching the website you mentioned," Jessica said, keeping her voice low. "Night Captures is part of a larger network of sites that specialize in non-consensual content. The FBI has been investigating them for years, but they're very good at hiding their operations. So Thomas is definitely part of something bigger?" "Almost certainly. The amount of money he's making suggests he's not just a customer, he's a content provider, and probably not his first time doing this." Jessica showed me printouts of information she had gathered about Thomas's online activities. We found accounts linked to his email address on several forums where people discuss drugging techniques and share illegal content. He's been active in these communities for at least 2 years. 2 years. That meant Thomas had been planning this long before he started drugging me, maybe even before we got married. "There's more," Jessica continued. "We found evidence that he's been in contact with other men who do similar things. They share tips about drugs, cameras, and how to avoid getting caught. It's like a how-to network for predators." She handed me a folder of documents. These are screenshots of conversations where Thomas discusses his subject, that's you. He talks about your schedule, your habits, even personal details about your relationship. He's been treating you like a project. Reading Thomas's words about me was devastating. He described me like I was an object, discussing the best times to drug me and which camera angles worked best. He even shared details about our intimate life that made me feel violated all over again. "The good news is that this gives us evidence of premeditation and conspiracy," Jessica said. "When we arrest him, we'll have enough to put him away for a very long time, but we need to be smart about how we do this." Jessica explained that they wanted to catch Thomas in the act while also gathering evidence about his network. "We need you to help us set up a sting operation. It's going to be dangerous, but it's the best way to get enough evidence to stop not just Thomas, but the other men he's working with." "What would I have to do?" "Pretend to drink the drugged tea while wearing a wire. We'll have officers nearby, but you'll need to act unconscious while Thomas commits his crimes. It's the only way to get video evidence that will hold up in court." The thought of deliberately putting myself back in that vulnerable position terrified me, but I thought about the other women who might be suffering the same thing. If Thomas was part of a network, there were probably victims I could help save. When would we do this? "Soon, but first we need to make sure you're safe and that we have backup plans in case something goes wrong." As I drove home that evening, I realized I was about to become bait in a trap to catch the man I had once loved more than anyone in the world. 3 days later, Dr. Winters called with the test results that confirmed our worst fears. My blood showed traces of Rohypnol and lorazepam, powerful sedatives that explained the memory gaps and deep sleep I had been experiencing. The hair test revealed these drugs had been in my system regularly for at least 4 months. Natalie, the levels we found are dangerous, Dr. Winters explained over the phone. If Thomas had given you much more, or if you had any underlying health conditions, this could have killed you. That evening, Detective Michael Foster came to Carmen's apartment to brief me on the sting operation. He was a tall man with kind eyes, who spoke gently but seriously about what we were planning. "I want you to understand the risks," he said. "Thomas has escalated his behavior over time, and men like him can become violent when they feel cornered. We'll have officers positioned around your house, but there will be a few minutes where you'll be alone with him." The plan was for me to go home and act completely normal. I would drink the tea Thomas prepared, but beforehand I would take a mild stimulant that Dr. Winters had given me to counteract the sedatives. I would be wearing a tiny recording device hidden in my jewelry, and there would be cameras positioned outside the house to capture Thomas entering and leaving. "The most important thing is that you stay calm and don't break character," Detective Foster explained. "If Thomas suspects anything, he might panic and hurt you before we can intervene." Carmen grabbed my hand. "Are you sure you want to do this? There has to be another way." "There are other women out there going through the same thing," I said. "If I don't do this, Thomas and his friends will keep hurting people." The next evening, I sat at our kitchen table waiting for Thomas to come home, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The recording device felt heavy against my chest, even though it was smaller than a button. I had practiced acting drowsy and unconscious with Detective Foster, but doing it for real would be completely different. Thomas arrived home at his usual time, carrying flowers and wearing the smile that used to make me feel safe. "Hey, beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "How was your day?" "Good," I managed to say, hoping my voice sounded normal. "Just tired." "Work was busy." "Perfect timing then. I'll make you some tea to help you relax." I watched him move around our kitchen, preparing the tea with the same careful routine I had observed for months, without understanding what it meant. He added honey and stirred it exactly 12 times, just like always. But now I knew he was also adding something else. "Here you go, sweetheart," he said, handing me the warm mug. "This should help you sleep well tonight." I took the mug with steady hands, even though inside I was screaming. The tea smelled like chamomile and honey, just like it always did. There was no way to tell it contained drugs that could have killed me. "Thank you," I said, taking a small sip. The stimulant Dr. Winters had given me was already making me feel alert and jittery, but I had to hide that from Thomas. As I pretended to drink the tea, Thomas sat across from me at the table, watching me with that intense look I now recognized. He was studying me, waiting for the drugs to take effect, planning what he would do to me once I was unconscious. "You know, Natalie, I've been thinking about taking a vacation soon," he said casually. "Maybe somewhere tropical. Just the two of us." The thought of being alone with Thomas in a foreign country, completely at his mercy, made my skin crawl. "That sounds nice," I said, taking another fake sip. After about 20 minutes, I started acting drowsy, letting my eyelids droop and speaking more slowly. Thomas's eyes lit up with anticipation. "You look tired, honey. Why don't you go lie down? I'll clean up here." I nodded sleepily and made my way to our bedroom, moving slowly like the drugs were taking effect. I changed into pajamas and got into bed, positioning myself exactly like I had been on the night I first discovered what Thomas was doing. Through barely open eyes, I watched Thomas enter the room carrying his camera equipment. But this time, I wasn't just a victim. This time, every move he made was being recorded by the police. Thomas set up his cameras with practiced efficiency, and I realized this routine was so familiar to him that he could probably do it in the dark. As he began taking photos of me, I heard him talking quietly to himself. "Perfect as always," he murmured. "The client is going to love this angle." Client. The word hit me like a punch. Thomas wasn't just selling my photos online, he was taking custom orders from specific people who were paying to see me violated. As Thomas continued his crimes, I lay perfectly still, knowing that every second of this nightmare was being recorded and would soon put him behind bars forever. Thomas had been photographing me for about 15 minutes when something went wrong. I had been lying perfectly still, breathing slowly and deeply like I was unconscious, but the stimulant Dr. Winters had given me was making my heart race. I was trying so hard to control my breathing that I wasn't breathing naturally anymore. "Natalie?" Thomas said suddenly, his voice sharp with suspicion. I forced myself to stay limp, but I could feel him staring at me more intently. He set down his camera and came closer to the bed. "Natalie, wake up," he said, shaking my shoulder harder than usual. When I didn't respond, he did something that made my blood freeze. He lifted my eyelid with his thumb and shined his phone's flashlight directly into my eye. I had to use every ounce of willpower not to react to the bright light. "That's strange," he muttered. "Usually you're much deeper under by now." He walked away from the bed, and I heard him moving around the room. Through my barely open eyes, I saw him checking the tea mug I had left on the nightstand. He sniffed it, then tasted it with his finger. "What the hell?" he said, his voice getting angry. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could see it through my pajama top. Thomas knew something was wrong, but I couldn't break character now. The police were depending on me to get enough evidence to arrest not just Thomas, but his entire network. Thomas grabbed his phone and made a call. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "I think she knows." I couldn't hear the other person's response, but Thomas's side of the conversation was terrifying. "No, she's not unconscious. The tea didn't work properly. I don't know how long she's known." "What do you mean dispose of her? She's my wife." "I understand the risks, but..." Dispose of her? Someone was telling Thomas to kill me. "Fine," Thomas said finally. "Give me an hour to figure this out." He hung up and stood at the foot of the bed, staring at me. I could feel his eyes on me, and I knew he was trying to decide what to do. The recording device against my chest felt like it was burning my skin. Where were the police? How long was I supposed to keep this up? "I know you're awake, Natalie," Thomas said suddenly. "Your breathing is all wrong, and you moved your hand when I wasn't looking." I stayed perfectly still, hoping he was bluffing. "Sit up," he commanded. "Now." When I didn't move, Thomas grabbed my arm and yanked me upright. I said, "Sit up." I had no choice but to open my eyes and look at him. The man staring back at me was not the Thomas I had married. His face was cold and angry, and there was something dangerous in his eyes that I had never seen before. "How long have you known?" he demanded. "Known what?" I tried to sound confused and sleepy. "Don't play dumb with me. How long have you known about the cameras? About the tea?" I realized there was no point in pretending anymore. "A few days," I said quietly. Thomas laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "A few days? And what exactly do you think you know?" "I know you've been drugging me and taking pictures while I was unconscious. I know you've been selling them online." "That's all you know? You have no idea how big this really is, do you?" Before I could answer, Thomas's phone rang. He answered it immediately. "She's awake. Yes, I'm sure. No, I don't think she's told anyone yet." "Okay, I'll handle it." He hung up and looked at me with an expression that made me truly afraid for my life. "Here's what's going to happen, Natalie. You're going to forget everything you think you know, and we're going to go back to our normal life. Because if you don't, very bad things are going to happen to you and your family." "What do you mean?" My business partners don't like loose ends, and right now, you're a very big loose end." Thomas moved toward the dresser where he kept his camera equipment, but instead of reaching for a camera, he opened the bottom drawer and pulled out something that made my heart stop. A gun. "I really hoped it wouldn't come to this," he said, checking to make sure it was loaded. "I actually do love you, Natalie, but business is business." Just as Thomas turned back toward me with the gun in his hand, I heard the sound I had been praying for. Car doors slamming outside our house. "Police! Search warrant!" Thomas's face went white as the front door burst open, and heavy footsteps pounded through our house. "Drop the weapon!" Detective Foster's voice boomed from our bedroom doorway. Thomas looked at me, then at the gun in his hand, then at the police officers pointing their weapons at him. For a moment, I thought he might try to shoot his way out. Instead, he smiled that charming smile I had fallen in love with years ago. "Hello, officers," he said calmly. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." The trial began 6 months later, and I had never been more nervous in my life. Sitting in that courtroom, looking at Thomas in his orange jumpsuit, I could barely recognize the man I had once planned to spend my life with. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The photos, the videos, the recorded conversations, and the testimony from other victims who had come forward after his arrest. Detective Foster had been right about Thomas being part of something much bigger. The investigation revealed a network of 12 men across 3 states who had been drugging and exploiting women, then selling the content online. Thomas had been one of their top producers, making over $40,000 in the past year from videos of me alone. The most shocking revelation came when they arrested Thomas's contact, a man named Vincent Chen, who ran the entire operation. Vincent had been the voice on the phone telling Thomas to dispose of me that night. He had been coordinating similar crimes with men across the country, providing them with untraceable drugs and teaching them how to avoid detection. "Mrs. Brooks," the prosecutor said when it was my turn to testify, "can you tell the court about the night you discovered what your husband was doing?" I took a deep breath and looked directly at the jury. Over the past months, I had learned that my story could help other women, and that gave me strength. I had been feeling confused and tired for months. I began. I would wake up with no memory of the night before, and my husband would tell me I had fallen asleep early. I trusted him completely, so I never questioned it. I told them about dumping the tea, pretending to be unconscious, and watching Thomas photograph me. I described finding the hidden cameras throughout our house and discovering the photos in his locked drawer. Several jury members looked horrified as I explained how Thomas had turned our home into a recording studio. The hardest part, I continued, was realizing that everything about our marriage had been a lie. Thomas didn't love me. He saw me as a product to be sold to strangers on the internet. Thomas's lawyer tried to argue that I had consented to the photos, but the evidence was too strong. The drugs in my system, the hidden cameras, the online conversations where Thomas discussed drugging techniques, it all painted a clear picture of systematic abuse. The most powerful moment came when 3 other women testified about their experiences with men in Thomas's network. Sarah, a teacher from Ohio, had been drugged by her boyfriend for over a year. Maria, a nurse from Texas, discovered her roommate had been selling videos of her to the same websites Thomas used. Jennifer, a college student from Florida, had been targeted by a man she met online who specifically sought out women to victimize. "These men don't see us as human beings," Sarah said during her testimony. "We're just objects to them, ways to make money. They study us, learn our routines, and then exploit our trust in the most horrible way possible." When the verdicts came back, Thomas was found guilty on all charges: drugging without consent, sexual exploitation, distribution of illegal content, conspiracy, and attempted murder for pulling the gun on me. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Vincent Chen received life in prison for running the network. The other men involved got sentences ranging from 10 to 30 years. The websites were shut down, and the FBI recovered thousands of videos and photos that were used as evidence to help other victims. But the legal victory was only part of my healing process. The months after Thomas's arrest were some of the darkest of my life. I had to move out of our house because I couldn't stand being surrounded by the places where he had violated me. I started therapy with Dr. Rebecca Martinez, who specialized in helping victims of intimate partner violence. "What Thomas did to you was not your fault, doctor," Martinez reminded me during one of our sessions. "Predators are skilled at manipulation. They choose victims specifically because we're trusting and loving people." Carmen moved in with me for the first few months, helping me rebuild my sense of safety. She would check all the locks at night and sit with me when I had nightmares about Thomas coming back. Slowly, with her support and therapy, I began to feel like myself again. A year after the trial, I started volunteering with an organization that helps victims of technology-facilitated abuse. I spoke at conferences and support groups, sharing my story to help other women recognize the warning signs I had missed. "You survived something that would have destroyed many people, doctor," Martinez told me during one of our last sessions. "Now you're using that experience to help others. That takes incredible strength." 2 years after Thomas's conviction, I met David, a kind man who worked as a counselor for trauma survivors. He understood my past without judgment and never pressured me to move faster than I was comfortable with. When I told him my story, he held my hand and said, "Thank you for trusting me with something so important." Our relationship grew slowly, built on honesty and respect, everything my marriage to Thomas had lacked. David never made my tea without asking, never used my computer without permission, and always made sure I felt safe and heard. On a sunny morning 3 years after the trial, I woke up in my new apartment, in a bed I had chosen, next to a man who truly loved me. The nightmares had mostly stopped, and while I would always carry the scars of what Thomas did to me, I had learned that surviving trauma could make you stronger, not just broken. I thought about the woman I had been before, trusting, naive, willing to overlook red flags because I wanted to believe in love. That woman was gone, but the person I had become was wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. I had learned that real love doesn't require you to give up your safety or your voice. Thomas had tried to destroy me, but instead, he had helped me discover just how resilient I could be. And every day I spent helping other survivors was proof that he had failed completely. The girl who had once been afraid to question her husband's behavior had become a woman who would never again let anyone silence her voice or dim her light. I was finally truly free.